What's up, guys? Thank you for tuning into the Breakthrough for Performance podcast, episode 2. I am your host, Coach Evan, and today we are here with Coach Xavier. If you
Howdy.
guys don't recognize Coach Xavier, that is because he is here primarily in the evenings with the athletes. The adults will see him as well, but I've been hyping up this podcast all the morning, guys. I don't know how many people in the evenings have heard about it. So if you didn't listen to the first one, welcome. Thanks for listening. Hello, Coach Xavier.
Howdy. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I want to start this off by shouting out our January 18th family and friends workout. This is a beginner friendly workout. We'd love to see you guys bring your friends or family. We have that at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and 10 a.m. Just let any of us know, um, either of us or Coach Eric, and we'll get your spot reserved. Would love to meet your guys' friends and family. Please come down. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, those events are usually great. It's just usually like a regress version of what we do on the floor in our normal classes. So it's definitely not as demanding, but it's always a ton of fun.
Fun. That is exactly the word we're looking for there. It's just going to be a
Yeah.
good time. You got any friends or family you've been telling about the gym? This is the perfect time to bring them down. So let's start off with some highlights of the week. Just from the sessions I've been doing in the morning. I think Julie really deserves a shout out. She has been absolutely crushing it lately. And when she first came in, she was barely able to do the 18-pound kettlebell. She was strong enough, right? A lot of people come in and they're strong enough to do movements, but they don't feel really comfortable. And now she's ripping 30-pound dumbbells like it's nothing. So absolutely, Julie deserves a shout out there. Um, Overall, everybody's been crushing it on the RDLs. We've been doing a lot of reference RDLs lately, which, if you're not familiar with those, that is where you're doing RDLs with a bench behind your knees. Not necessarily a bench, but any kind of implement to help you keep your knee in position, keep your shin vertical, and really get deep into a hamstring stretch there. We've been absolutely crushing that on the training floor. So good job, everybody. Coach Xavier, you have any athlete highlights for us?
Yeah, I think especially over the last few weeks, we've been running floor press as one of our primary compound movements, along with straight bar deadlifts, straight bar squats, and two sets or particular sessions that come to mind would be one of the back squat sessions we had last week with Luca, where he hit an 8 rep PR with two plates, so 225.
Wow.
And that was a nice PR, I think, by 3 reps, because the most he had ever done with that weight was 5. So definitely significant there. Nicolina would be the other athlete. She, came here when she joined the gym a few months ago.
She's been killing it.
Yeah, she's just been, it's been like a week to week, session to session thing. She couldn't really even handle the weight of the bar when she first came in, had to kind of work her way up through dumbbell pressing. And now she just did a 3 by 8, so 3 sets of 8 with 65 pounds on floor press yesterday. And that would be another significant highlight, I would say, kind of showcasing some of the progression our athletes have been making. And that was just, to me,
That is awesome.
very impressive. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, Nicolina is also our athlete of the month. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So congratulations, Nicolina. Just from the sessions I've had with you, the few ones, I can see week to week improvements, and that is absolutely nothing to scoff at. So great stuff there. How's everybody doing overall with the athletes? I know we're really pushing these testing movements, right? We have our floor press, we have our back squat. I believe we're also testing conventional deadlift along with a few others, and we're for those of you who aren't familiar, any of our adults listening who don't know too much about our athlete program, we start off each block, each 12-week cycle with a testing week of new movements. We go hard to improve them over the next 12 weeks. Obviously, the programming varies throughout that 12-week cycle. Then we retest at the end, and I think we're getting ready to test again in a few weeks. X, how are we expecting everybody to do?
Definitely. I mean, the progress is already showing with the testing movements. And I think that's something to kind of touch upon with some of the athletes or just anyone in general is, whatever they hit for their baseline week or whatever they hit on the first testing week as kind of just, okay, now we have our number that we need to beat at the end of the training cycle. Some people kind of lose sight of the progress they make throughout the actual training cycle, and they're kind of just looking at what they do at the end of it. Whereas, like, these people and athletes and adults are hitting PRs constantly week to week, month to month. Um, so I think that's something to kind of focus on there is that, um, all the progress kind of comes in the actual training, and it's not always just about the testing, but everyone's been making significant progress, and it's been really nice to see.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, and I want to touch on that for a second. So, even if you're not testing and retesting 12 weeks later, it's important for us all to understand that you can't gauge your strength levels just off of session to session, right? In the very beginning, you absolutely can. You're going to be getting stronger every single day. It's just kind of how that works when you're new to it. But as you train more, the progress starts to slow a little bit. You start to fatigue a little bit session to session. So what I would encourage everybody to do is think rather than what weight did I lift today? What weight did I lift yesterday? Try to take a step back and think month to month. Am I generally stronger than I was a month ago? Am I generally handling more volume than I was a month ago? Am I generally recovering better than I was a month ago? Right? We have so many different ways to measure progress. And the more of a step back we can take, the more we can observe the actual trend of how our training's going. So, again, it's not always going to be day to day. It's going to be more month to month, things like that, maybe even season to season, right? uh, me personally, I've been lifting weights probably about 10 years now, and for me to gauge how strong I am based off of how I felt yesterday or the week before, it would feel silly to me at this point because again, it's more month to month. How am I doing with the actual progress of throughout a block, right? So just wanted to touch on that a little bit there because with our athletes, it's very apparent because we're testing and then we're retesting and we're comparing. And we're getting into that a little bit with the adults as well, setting some specific number goals. And I think that's helping us out a lot. So,
Yeah, it's simplest way. Think macro, not micro. Where are we at the, 2 week, 4 week, 6 week, 8 week, not necessarily session to session. So, yeah, I think that's important for people to kind of keep in mind as they begin training and, not to be too hard on themselves on the session to session progress.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, that's what's going on the training floor right now. So, let's move into our topic of the day. And this was suggested by Stephanie. I thought it was a really, really good suggestion. Again, guys, if you want to suggest anything for the podcast, for us to talk about, we'd love to talk about it. Again, as I spoke about in the first episode, this is really the coach's chance to sit down and dive into a topic a little deeper. Because when you guys are in the gym, we got 45 minutes to an hour to get hard training in. And while we'd love to sit down and talk to you guys about training, about nutrition, about all of that stuff, our priority is always you guys getting a great workout in. So this just allows us a little more of an opportunity to dive deep into any of these topics. So let's get into our topic of the day, which is going to be pre and post training nutrition, right? So what are we eating before we work out? What are we eating in the middle of a workout, at the end of a workout? And yeah, so I think it's best to start this off with talking about macronutrients, right? If you guys aren't familiar with macronutrients, that's going to be the biggest block of nutritional subjects that we can break down. Okay, so that's going to be your carbohydrates, that's going to be your fats, that's going to be your proteins. Now, this isn't going to be a 3 hour nutritional breakdown, but just to get into it briefly, again, it's not the most complex breakdown, but carbohydrates are going to be your body's main energy source. Protein is you can kind of think of as the building blocks of muscle, and your fats are going to help with hormone regulation, joint health, things like that. So when we think about that and we think about that in the context of training, we have to prioritize usually our carbohydrates, right? Because it is the body's main energy source, you're going to go through a lot of that during your training. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with, running gels or anything like that, but you can kind of think about that, right? It's very, very condensed, concentrated sugar that you just get into your body, nothing else, right? So it's not a big thing of brown rice or a big thing of pasta or something, with a lot of fiber in it, right? And when we talk about fiber, it's important to understand how it slows down digestion and it can help you slow down like a big meal getting broken down in your body, or for anybody who has kind of like like a sugar intolerance, any kind of diabetic stuff, um, that's going to help slow down the rate of absorption of the sugar into your bloodstream. That's not really what we're looking to do when we're training, right? So when we get into the gym, we want to be as fueled as possible. Okay. With that being said, we don't want any of the other things to kind of slow that down too much. Now, am I saying don't have any protein before you go to the gym? Don't have any fats before you go to the gym? Absolutely not. I'm not telling you guys to eat candy before you go to the gym. But if we're talking about what is the most optimal thing to have before the gym, I would probably suggest fruits, like a banana. Banana's personally my go-to. Again, it's going to be mostly those carbohydrates that are easy for your body to break down and get right into the bloodstream. Coach Xavier, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think just as you said, making sure that you are getting an adequate of carbohydrates and proteins and fats throughout your day, but making sure that you can break that up in a way to where, you're able to optimize digestion. So you're not feeling overly bloated when you're training, or, making sure maybe you're timing your protein closer to your training sessions, especially when, for the most part, most of our adults are really just trying to lose some weight, trying to get a little bit healthier, and just trying to be generally healthier. Um, they're not always going to be in a caloric surplus like a lot of our athletes are. So, protein timing can be super important because when you are in a deficit and you are trying to lose weight, obviously the amount of energy you have to use and calories you can pull energy from is going to be a lot less during those periods. So, meal timing and how you break down your meals is super important. Um, I think probably the most important thing that I would say for adults is, or specifically when it does come to eating habits, is to not buy into particular fads that are kind of villainizing certain macronutrients. Like, I mean, really, you're never going to hear anyone say protein's bad unless you're talking to someone who's, extreme, vegetarian or vegan, where they're kind of, saying that protein isn't super important. Then you have ketogenic diets, which are kind of restricted of carbohydrates. And then generally, most of the time, people are trying to keep their fats a little bit lower because it's kind of what they assume to be healthy, but adequate fats too. So making sure you're not buying into any fad diets or, really restricting yourself too hard at first. Obviously, with time, people will kind of just naturally gravitate to diets or particular diet styles that suit them best and kind of fit their lifestyles. Um, but right off the bat, first things first, just make sure you're eating well. Just think how are my eating habits changing? Am I, eating fast food? Am I eating whole foods? Start with healthy eating habits first. And then, as you train and you get an idea of what your body needs, you can start to get a little bit more specific.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that's actually something I wanted to touch on, but I kind of forgot there is the actual volume of food, right? Xavier, you mentioned not going into the gym too bloated or anything like
Bloated.
that. Personally, I find that that is the biggest factor between whether or not I have a good workout. A lot of people are going to have different strategies, right? Some people love eating a big meal before they go to the gym. Some people hate it. Some people enjoy working out fasted. If you find something that personally works best for you, please stick with it, right? But at the end of the day, um, the biggest rocks that I would suggest you guys keep in mind for pre-training nutrition is one, fueling the body with some carbohydrates. Two, making sure that you don't have too much food in your stomach so that way you're still digesting food while you're training, right? We don't want to be doing that. Okay. Um,
Yeah, how
one more
many
thing.
times have you heard someone come into training and they're like, I ate a burrito, an hour, 30 minutes before, and you feel it the entire time. Or I ate a burger, or I ate something. It just better to keep the volume a little bit lower pre-training, and then you can get in a little bit more volume post-training. I would say
Mhm,
generally.
absolutely. One more thing before we move on to kind of like the middle or after training nutrition is some actual kind of practical suggestions. For me personally, like I mentioned before, I like to do a lot of my workouts fasted. Again, I just feel the best that way. I feel the best not even thinking about what I'm eating before a workout. So I try not to too much. If I do feel like I'm hungry or something like that, I'll have either a small granola bar, again, something carbohydrate dense without too many protein or fat in it. That's going to kind of slow down that digestion. Just looking to get some sugar in the blood. That's really it. Okay. So I'll either do banana, like granola bar. If you guys like any of those electrolyte drinks, like a Gatorade or something like that. Personally, it's not what I like to do, but it's absolutely a viable option for you. Um, I would say you want to do that about an hour before training. If you do it on your way into the gym, sure, if you're hungry, go for it, but it's not really going to have that effect of actually getting into the bloodstream and fueling your body, right? So I would recommend, again, granola bar, banana, something light, but with those carbohydrates in it, and you're going to give your body enough time to actually digest that. So 45 minutes is kind of the low end on that. Really looking for 90 minutes to 2 hours before, again, for optimal training. Xavier, do you have any recommendations for a pre-training meal?
Yeah, I think it really comes just down to how intense your training is going to be, and then relative to the person who is training. So, if it's someone who's you know, maybe balancing resistance training with some sort of field sport, or, they're in high school or college and they're playing a sport, obviously making sure that you're getting some sodium and electrolytes before, making sure you're getting enough of that and carbohydrates. So, for an athlete, I would suggest any sort of form of electrolyte. Gatorade would be perfect. Even like an electrolyte powder would be perfect. I think just as you said, something simple and very carbohydrate dense, like a granola bar, is quick and easy. And obviously, the younger you are, the easier it is for you to be a little bit neglectful and forgetful with your nutrition. So keeping it simple is definitely important. And I think just having something prepackaged, ready to go, makes it convenient. And I think those two things should kind of cover most of your bases for, an adult who maybe isn't as experienced in the gym, or, maybe is just balancing the resistance training with work, or, whatever it is at home. Uh, Something simple again. I think a piece of fruits with a good amount of water. I think that's also super important, is not even just thinking macros. I think also just thinking hydration as well. So 8 ounces
Absolutely.
of water, 12 ounces of water beforehand with a piece of fruit. I think most of the time is going to cover your bases. If you're someone that goes all day without eating at work and then you're training later on the day, maybe a protein bar could replace the piece of fruit, or you could kind of combine the two. Again, I think just convenience pre-training is the best way to kind of keep your thought process when thinking about pre-training nutrition.
Absolutely. And that kind of ties us into our next one, which is the intra training nutrition. Now, this one isn't talked about as much because for it to really be a factor, you have to have a high training volume and a high training intensity. This doesn't really come into play unless you're working out for, you know, 2 hours plus. So that would be something like not resistance. That would be something like distance running. That would be something like a big sports game or a tournament or something like that. So 45 minutes of strength training in the gym, not really a thing. Um, but it is a thing in the context of keeping hydration high. Keeping hydration up is kind of always going to be the most important thing, way more important than the actual carbohydrates for most people, is actually having water in your body. If you're dehydrated, you're not going to be strong. Your cardio is not going to be there. It's just not a good time. So I'm sure you've all heard to drink water. This is your 5,000th reminder to drink water. If you have some near you, take a sip. Please do, because most people are not drinking enough water. Um, with that being said, kind of think similarly as with the pre-training nutrition for intra. Earlier, I mentioned the goo gels that runners have. It's kind of the ideal thing to have there. It's specifically made for this. So even faster digesting sugars because as it goes into the bloodstream, it is immediately being used, right? So something that you don't even have to think about digesting. If you've ever heard of powerlifters eating candy, that is exactly what we're talking about here. Quick, quick digesting sugars right into the bloodstream because it is being used right away. So this is when Gatorade is even better of an idea. At this point, I really wouldn't recommend fruits, but I'm never going to tell you to stop eating fruit, so go for it if you really like. Um, Goo gels, Gatorade, we're thinking more pure sugars. And again, this isn't really something that's going to come up often. I'd really say if your workout is 90 minutes plus around that hour mark, that's probably when it's the best idea. Again, This is going to be your distance running. This is going to be any kind of sporting tournament or, other things like that where you have to really be in tip-top shape for multiple hours. So again, not too relevant. Just wanted to touch on that quickly because it obviously is an important factor of training nutrition. Um, Xavier, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think really when you want to keep it as simple as possible, pre and intra training nutrition is pretty much the same. Most of the time, if you cover your bases on your pre-training nutrition, you shouldn't need too much intra-training nutrition, especially with anyone coming to our classes that we're running, which again, tend to be anywhere from like 45, 55 minutes. Really not necessary, but I know a lot of people that we work with have goals outside of what we're just doing in the training room. And maybe someone might want to run a 5K or start jujitsu or kickboxing and introduce other forms of fitness into their life. I think that's where the intra training nutrition really comes into play. So again, just keep it simple. Pre intra training nutrition, very, very similar.
Yep, absolutely. Again, that one is going to be a little simpler. It's very close to the pre-training nutrition, but again, we're looking to fuel the muscles. We're looking to fuel the body with some fast digesting sugars, keep hydration up, keep the electrolytes up. Now, the electrolytes, which I don't think we spoke about too much before, you can kind of think of it as how your body holds on to the water. Okay. So this is when you hear if you have too much sodium, you're bloated the next day. Kind of the same thing. We're not looking to get bloated during training, obviously, but we do need to be able to hold on to the we do need to be able to hold on to the water. All right.
Yeah, that's something I feel like I run into very often, and something that I've definitely done in the past is, I'm drinking a gallon of water. I'm going to the bathroom very, very often. I still seem super dehydrated. It's like, okay, well, what's your sodium intake like? And I feel like a lot of people have this idea that sodium is bad, whereas at the end of the day, sodium is going to be one of your best ways, really the only way to make sure that you're retaining the water and utilizing the water that you're uh, taking in. So I think
Absolutely.
that's super important to consider. And if you ever do feel like you're dealing with issues with dehydration and you are drinking a ton of water, just look at your sodium intake and try to base your sodium intake around when you are intaking your water.
Absolutely. I think most sports drinks will have around 2 to 300 milligrams of sodium. That is kind of like a moderate dose. But again, if you really haven't eaten anything throughout the day, really no food at all. Most of our sodium is going to come from food, and most of it's, around that 300 mark. So it would be wise to make sure you have some of that in you. If you're already eating a lot, you're trying to eat less, it's probably not something to worry about. But again, it is an important part of how we actually stay hydrated. So that brings us into our last kind of group as far as nutrition for training goes, which is going to be the post training. Now, for me personally, the way that I look at this is one, we have to refuel the body with any carbohydrates that we, you know, exhausted from our actual training. Protein here is kind of the primary thought for me though, right? Protein is a very slow digesting macronutrient, proteins and fats. So now is probably the time to get it in, right? You don't want to have too much food in you before you train, so if you're looking for a time to eat a big meal, right after training is probably the time to do that, right? There's all kinds of ideas about the anabolic window. I'm sure there's some ideas out there about not eating a big meal after training. This idea I've heard a couple times of like, well, I don't want to waste the workout that I just had. Don't be afraid to eat a big meal after working out. Again, this is probably the best time to have it, not because of any magical protein timing thing going on there, but just because you're done with a good workout, it's time to eat, right? It's time to eat. So, to touch on protein quickly, you should all be shooting for around zero point 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per body weight, per pound of body weight, right? So, if you're 150 pounds, you should probably have 130 to 150 grams of protein a day. And what this is going to do is just make sure that your body actually has the, as I mentioned earlier, the building blocks of muscle for you to recover from, right? If you're not eating enough protein, you're just not recovering as well. And obviously, if you guys are working hard in the gym, spending a lot of time, really carving out that schedule in the day and doing all this work to have good habits. Really, really important to make sure you're getting the most out of that on the nutritional end. If I were to say one big thing that is the most important, well, two real things that are the most important as far as training nutrition goes, it would be to keep the hydration up. We spoke about a couple ways to do that before. To get that protein intake in. Because if you're not doing those, you're just not getting enough out of your workouts, right? So if you guys need any specific advice or help with getting that in, talk to us. Always happy to help. Um, let's touch on fats a little bit there, right? Fats, again, slow digesting nutrient, important for joint health and hormone health. Again, this is kind of the time to get that in. Now, I don't want this to sound like I'm making extreme statements about, well, don't eat anything before training, eat everything after training. The most important thing we can keep in mind with any of this stuff is that it actually works for your life schedule. Okay. If you get up and you go right to the gym and you don't have time for a big meal before work, that's totally okay, right? You can have all of this stuff later on in the day, all different kinds of strategies for meal timing and that sort of thing. So again, I don't want anybody to take any of this as super hard rules there. Just kind of do what you can to have the, you know, best training session. And you're going to find ways and you're going to talk to us. We're going to work out efficient strategies for you guys um, to get that done, right? So my classic staple meal after training. Personally, I don't eat meat or dairy, so most of that's going to look like tofu as a protein source, one big serving of a protein source. Again, something like a tofu mixed in with a carbohydrate, which for me is usually chickpea pasta, and then some healthy fats in there. So something like an avocado. If you were to give me a big bowl of avocado, tofu, and chickpea pasta, we're getting a healthy serving in of carbohydrates, a ton of protein, and some good fats in there. And then you make it taste good, obviously. I'm not going to tell you how to make it taste good. You all know how you like food. If you need help cooking, then I'm here to help, but that's going to be a different topic. All right, different podcast, maybe episode 3. Coach Xavier, do you have anything to say about post-training nutrition there?
Yeah, I think this is a great time where, especially for those of you who are busier, and this is something that, obviously I don't want people to become dependent on, but where supplements really come into play, something like a protein powder really comes into play is post training. So if you are someone that feels you need to utilize that, or you just know you're not able to really get in enough meals throughout the day, something like a protein shake post training, this is the best time to do that. Um, Obviously, with some time, if you are looking to actually get a full meal in, for me, Evan and I have this in common. We don't eat meat or dairy, so this isn't how everyone's post training or dinner is going to really look, but something like a tofu or even just some sort of bean or legume is usually like one of my primary protein sources post training. And then a carbohydrate like a potato, something with like a little bit of potassium also post training helps. Even like a rice, some sort of rice, however you like that, brown or white, really doesn't make much of a difference. And then some sort of seasoning. I usually just like the seasoning because obviously just having a healthy relationship with your food and making sure your food tastes good and you enjoy what you eat is going to allow you to keep that food as more of a staple in your diet, and it's going to keep you consistent with your healthier eating habits. So for me, something like tofu with soy sauce, perfect. Gives me a little bit of sodium, gives the tofu some flavor, kind of kills two birds with one stone with that. And then healthy fats really comes down to just like what I have available. Avocado is usually my go-to, some sort of pistachio, maybe pumpkin seed. I try to mainly get most of my nutrients from whole food sources, so that's something that I really touch upon. But again, if you need, supplements are always a good option when it comes to this kind of stuff. So generally, that's something that you can always utilize if needed.
Thank you. Yeah, one last thing I want to touch on there, and I love that you brought this up, is consistency and making sure that your food actually tastes good. The reason why we want your food to taste good isn't because, I really care that you're eating food that I would eat. That's obviously not an important factor to me. But what is important to us is that you enjoy the foods enough to where it doesn't feel like a chore, right? A lot of the time when people get into the gym, their first thought is, I'm going hardcore. The workout's got to be hardcore. I got to die on my way out, and I got to hate what I eat. You do not have to hate what you eat. You should enjoy what you eat, no matter what kind of diet you're on. So if you feel like your food doesn't taste too good while in your macronutrient range, right? We have this laid out plan. Your food doesn't taste too good, try something else, right? Ask us for some recipes. We'd always love to talk about that. All right. All right. So I think that just about covers everything for at least in the short term for this brief overview of pre, intra, and post training nutrition. If I were to break this up into maybe one or two closing sentences there, it would be that pre-training is about fueling and hydration. Has to be before your workouts enough to digest that going into the workout. Don't want to have too much food in our bodies when we're actually trying to work out. Intra training nutrition is not going to come up a lot, but it is going to be very similar to the pre-training nutrition. Again, sugars, electrolytes, water. Post-training nutrition is going to be time to get those macronutrients that are going to help us recover a little bit more. So again, that's going to be our protein. We have a uh, kind of standard guideline of zero point 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And then fats, you can kind of just go based off of what you enjoy. I think a standard guideline there is probably like 1/3
Something.
of, I think a standard guideline for fats would be about 1/3 of your body weight in grams, right? So if you're 150, I think 50 is probably a little low. Let's say more like 0.5, right? So that'd be about 75 grams there would be a good starting range. But again, this is all going to come down to what your actual goals are, whether that's weight gain, strength gain, fat loss, all that kind of thing. So it's really individualized. And if you have specific questions or you're unsure of anything, as always, please talk to us. But yeah, that's about it for at least what I have to go over. Coach Xavier, do you have anything to add for that as far as the summary goes?
Yeah, a lot of this is really just very general. If you're someone that just deals with a very busy schedule, you don't need to feel so heavily obligated that this needs to be done exactly the way we described, to where if you don't do it like this, your training sessions or your workouts are just gonna, suck. It's not the case. You can make it work any way possible. There's so many different options and different strategies you can utilize in order to make sure that you're getting in all of your protein, your micros, your macros, so on and so forth. So, again, this is just a tool and just suggestions and insights that we are offering to you guys just to be able to digest and do what you can with it. Obviously, if you see us on the floor and at the gym, or reach out to us, we can always help you a little bit more specifically to your needs and to what you actually are looking to accomplish with your training, your workouts, and obviously your nutrition.
Yeah. Thanks, Coach X. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying there. So I think this is a pretty helpful overview. And if you guys find this helpful, please, give it a like, wherever you're listening to this, like a 5-star review, maybe share it with a friend if you found anything helpful. And let us know. Let us know how you're liking if you find this helpful or anything like that. Um, Looking
And
forward to
guys,
seeing
real quick,
everybody. Yep.
we uh we also do have an hour video of us going over each macronutrient in full detail. So we can also link most of you guys to
That is
that
true.
if you are
Totally forgot
interested.
about that.
So if you are looking for something a little bit more intricate, uh, we already did a video on that, so we can link you guys to that, and hopefully that will help you
Yep.
guys as well.
Yeah, if you guys find that interesting, reach out to Eric or myself, and we'll get that video sent over to you. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, looking forward to seeing everybody Saturday. Friends and family workout. It is a beginner workout designed just to show everybody kind of what we do and have a fun time with some faces you might not normally see in the gym. So yeah, thanks guys. Again, 5-star review. Share it with a friend if you found this helpful. Let us know how you're liking the podcast. Give us some suggestions for next time. And that is all we got. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you guys on the training floor.
Later.